Chapter 1. The quiet town of Ashwood lay nestled beneath shadowy mountains, a place seemingly untouched by modern chaos. At the edge of town, where dense forests loomed ominously, stood an ancient Victorian mansion, the Blackwood estate. Legend whispered that the manor was cursed, but for new residents Sarah and Daniel Mitchell, it was simply a bargain they couldn't resist. Their dreams of renovation and a fresh start obscured any reservations. As they unpacked, Sarah noticed peculiar carvings around the fireplace, intricate symbols that seemed to writhe under flickering candlelight. Shrugging off a chill, she joined Daniel upstairs. But when midnight tolled, soft footsteps echoed in empty corridors, unheard by their sleeping ears. Shadowy figures danced in corners, unseen eyes watching the newcomers with unsettling curiosity. Chapter 2. Daniel awoke with a start, cold sweat beading his forehead. Sarah slept soundly beside him, unaware of his unease. A distant humming filled the room, soft and melodic, drawing him toward the hall. Curious yet wary, Daniel crept down creaky stairs, each step amplifying his dread. The humming ceased abruptly. Silence, thick as fog, enveloped him. His breath hitched as he spotted a figure standing near the ornate mirror in the hallway, its reflection distorted and indistinct. As Daniel approached cautiously, the figure dissolved into shadows, leaving only his trembling reflection staring back at him. Shaking, he returned to bed, desperately convincing himself it had been merely a dream. Chapter 3. Sarah began noticing changes. Small, unsettling alterations, a book misplaced, portraits askew, whispers in vacant rooms. Dismissing them as fatigue, she continued renovations, determined to ignore her growing discomfort. Until one evening, while peeling wallpaper, she uncovered a hidden door. Breathing shallowly, she opened it to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling downward. Despite her instinct screaming caution, curiosity propelled her forward. At the staircase's bottom lay a dusty, candlelit chamber, dominated by an altar carved from obsidian stone. Symbols identical to those on the fireplace glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Panic welled in her chest, but the allure of the mystery proved too strong to resist. Chapter 4. Daniel found Sarah pale and withdrawn the next morning, hesitant to share her discovery. Eventually, trembling, she led him to the hidden chamber. Daniel felt inexplicably drawn toward the altar, compelled to touch the symbols. The instant his fingers brushed the stone, visions cascaded violently through his mind, scenes of blood, fire, and screaming faces. He pulled away, gasping. They agreed never to enter again, sealing the door with fresh plaster, pretending ignorance could dispel the evil they'd awoken. Yet deep down, they knew the presence would not let go so easily, its sinister whispers threading through their thoughts. Chapter 5. Weeks passed, tension thickening like smog. Townspeople eyed them warily, whispering behind cautious smiles. Daniel's nightmares worsened, becoming vivid, horrific hallucinations that blurred reality. Sarah grew distant, obsessed with symbols she secretly etched everywhere. One night, Daniel awoke to find Sarah missing. Panicked, he searched the house frantically. The hidden chamber's door stood ajar, a trail of blooded footprints leading downward. Following them, heart pounding, he found Sarah chanting in an unrecognizable tongue, eyes vacant, hands dripping blood from fresh wounds. Horrified, he watched the symbols she had carved into her skin glow ominously in rhythm with her chanting. Chapter 6. Desperate to save Sarah, Daniel reached toward her, but invisible forces hurled him backward. Sarah turned slowly, her eyes now black voids. Her voice distorted, she hissed, "He awakens." A deafening rumble shook the manor. The altar cracked open, emitting a shadowy mist forming a towering figure of darkness. Daniel recoiled as the entity spoke through Sarah, each word echoing agony, promising eternal torment. "Your souls feed my return." Chapter 7. Sarah collapsed, momentarily herself, pleading forgiveness as the shadow enveloped her. Daniel lunged forward, grasping at emptiness. Alone and desperate, he fled upstairs, seeking answers among town archives. A grim history unfolded. The estate, built atop ancient sacrificial grounds, imprisoned an unspeakable evil. Realizing their renovations had disrupted protective wards, Daniel knew he must reforge them before the shadow consumed Ashwood. but the materials and rituals necessary were long lost or hidden within obscure, guarded texts. Chapter 8. Rushing back, Daniel found the mansion cloaked in unnatural darkness. Townspeople gathered outside, entranced, drawn toward doom. He fought through them, confronting the shadow. It mocked his efforts, revealing it required Sarah's soul as the final sacrifice. Refusing to yield, Daniel recalled the symbol's patterns, carving them frantically into his flesh. His blood flowed, empowering ancient wards, trapping the shadow temporarily. The entity roared, its fury tangible, retreating into temporary silence. But Daniel knew it was merely buying time, not a solution. Chapter 9. Weak but resolved, Daniel rescued Sarah, barely conscious. They escaped as dawn broke, but the curse lingered, whispering vengeance. The townspeople, free of trance, shunned them, accusingly. Yet Sarah's pregnancy soon emerged, both joy and dread intertwining. They prayed for normalcy, yet feared their child was touched by darkness. Each day, shadows loomed closer, whispers became clearer, a haunting promise of impending doom. Chapter 10. Years later, their daughter, Emily, thrived despite their fears. Yet shadows clung stubbornly to corners, whispers persisted. Emily often spoke to unseen friends, smiling innocently at empty spaces. On her 10th birthday, Emily vanished, leaving only bloody footprints toward the manor. Terrified, Daniel and Sarah pursued, knowing the shadow awaited, stronger, thirsting for final revenge. The manor door creaked open, welcoming them home. Determined yet despairing, they entered, resolved to confront the darkness once and for all, no matter the cost. Chapter 11. Daniel and Sarah stepped through the threshold, the mansion breathing around them as if alive. Memories flooded their senses, the chilling whispers, the suffocating presence, and the symbols etched in blood. Now, however, their fear was eclipsed by sheer parental desperation. Emily's innocent laughter echoed faintly from deeper within, twisted by something dark and mocking. Following the sound, they ascended the staircase, now aged and warped, creaking underfoot like a warning. At the corridor's end stood Emily, facing the ornate mirror where Daniel first glimpsed the sinister figure. Her reflection was wrong, distorted and grotesque, grinning back with a malevolent sneer. Daniel shouted her name, his voice breaking, but Emily turned slowly, eyes darkened with the shadow's corruption. "You're home," she whispered coldly, smiling a smile too cruel for a child. Shadows writhed around her, bending reality into nightmarish shapes. Daniel lunged forward, but an invisible force froze him in place. Sarah wept, begging for mercy, but the child shook her head slowly, mocking sorrow. "You promised you'd protect me," Emily hissed, her voice echoing with layers of darkness. "But you brought me to him." Suddenly, the floor beneath Daniel and Sarah dissolved, and they plummeted through a vortex of swirling shadows and whispers into absolute darkness. Chapter 12. They awoke in the candlelit chamber beneath the mansion, bound in spectral chains that burned their skin with freezing fire. The obsidian altar pulsed like a beating heart. Above it hovered Emily, her form wrapped in shadows that caressed her like a malevolent guardian. "You cannot resist him forever," Emily stated plainly, her voice intertwined with a deeper, sinister resonance. "He has waited centuries for this sacrifice." Sarah strained against her chains, sobbing. "Emily, please! Fight him!" Emily hesitated, a flicker of vulnerability passing over her eyes. But it vanished swiftly, replaced by the shadow's unyielding darkness. Daniel, desperate and blooded, whispered an ancient phrase he'd learned from forgotten texts, hoping to awaken any lingering humanity within Emily. The chamber shuddered violently, the shadows recoiling as Emily screamed, a cry mingling innocence and monstrosity. The shadow's form wavered, Emily's body shuddering violently as two entities battled within her small frame. Suddenly, with a final, soul-rending cry, Emily collapsed onto the altar, shadows dispersing briefly. Daniel and Sarah broke free, racing toward their daughter. But before they reached her, darkness surged again, an explosive force hurling them against stone walls. The shadow's laughter resonated through the chamber, deep and mocking. Chapter 13. When Daniel awoke, Sarah lay unconscious beside him. The altar stood empty, Emily vanished once more. Rage surged, fueling Daniel's resolve. He dragged himself upright, determination mingling with despair. They had lost too much already. Sarah stirred, dazed but breathing. Supporting each other, they climbed painfully out of the chamber. The manor now existed between worlds, corridors twisting into impossible shapes, filled with echoes of past horrors and future terrors. As they wandered the warped halls, whispers intensified, revealing fragments of the Shadow's ancient history, rituals, sacrifices, the endless hunger of an entity imprisoned by powerful sorcery now weakened by their intrusion. Daniel realized the Shadow sought not only freedom but dominion over the living realm, using Emily's purity as a conduit. Guided by instinct, they reached the Grand Library, previously sealed behind an ornate door. Inside, ancient tomes and manuscripts sprawled chaotically, their pages fluttering, whispering dark secrets. Here lay the answer, the original rites performed by the first guardians of Ashwood to seal the Shadow beneath the mansion. Chapter 14. Frantically, Daniel deciphered faded scripts, realizing with dread that a final sealing ritual required a sacrifice, a life willingly offered to bind the entity eternally. Sarah grasped his hand, her eyes heavy with understanding and sorrowful acceptance. Before they could speak further, a deafening roar shook the library. Emily stood in the doorway, shadow enveloping her small form like a cloak. "It's too late," she whispered, voice chillingly calm. "He is here." The mansion trembled violently, cracking open, revealing glimpses of a nightmare dimension bleeding through into their reality. Shadows poured forth, monstrous shapes clawing at the boundary between worlds. In that instant, Daniel knew hesitation would doom them all. Yet his heart refused the sacrifice demanded, unwilling to lose Sarah. But before he could act, Sarah stepped forward defiantly, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Take me instead," she whispered into the darkness. "Leave my daughter." The Shadow paused, intrigued. Sarah approached Emily slowly, tenderly touching her daughter's corrupted face. "I love you," she murmured softly, embracing Emily even as darkness began devouring her own form. Daniel screamed in agony as Sarah's body dissolved, consumed by the hungry shadows. Chapter 15. With Sarah's sacrifice, the Shadow momentarily recoiled, distracted by the surge of power. Emily fell limp to the floor, breathing shallowly but alive. Daniel lifted her, running from the crumbling mansion as reality itself fought to close the breach. Behind them, Sarah's spirit, radiant with fierce maternal love, waged battle against the Shadow entity, holding it back just long enough for father and daughter to escape into the breaking dawn. Outside, townspeople watched as the mansion imploded silently, consumed by an infernal void before collapsing into itself. Ashwood fell silent, the oppressive Shadow finally gone, or at least sealed, buried beneath rubble and ashes. Daniel held Emily tight, grief and relief mixing as sunlight warmed their tear-stained faces. But deep inside, he sensed Sarah's lingering presence, eternally vigilant, eternally suffering to hold back the Shadow that could never truly be destroyed. Yet, beneath his bittersweet relief, Daniel felt a gnawing unease. Sarah's sacrifice might not last forever, and darkness, once awakened, was rarely content to remain buried. As he carried Emily home, he glanced back, seeing only emptiness where the mansion once stood, yet feeling the chilling certainty that the Shadow still watched from somewhere beyond, patiently awaiting another chance to claim freedom. Chapter 16. Years slipped by, blurring memories but never quite erasing them. Daniel and Emily had moved away from Ashwood, finding refuge in a distant coastal village where salty breezes and waves crashing against cliffs muffled whispers from their haunted past. Emily grew into adolescence, bright and resilient, though shadows lingered in her eyes, a reminder of horrors she scarcely remembered yet instinctively feared. Daniel tried to live normally, but his dreams betrayed him nightly, still replaying Sarah's sacrifice, still hearing the mocking laughter of the Shadow entity. At times, he swore he felt Sarah's gentle touch brushing his cheek, reassuring yet tinged with sorrow. He knew, despite distance and years, their ordeal was unfinished. One cold autumn night, Emily abruptly awoke screaming, drenched in sweat, sobbing incoherently about the darkness coming back. Daniel rushed to comfort her, heart racing as she clung to him desperately, repeating fragments of a language she shouldn't know, words of a chant he recognized instantly. It was the shadow's language, words carved on obsidian altars, seared into Daniel's memory. Chapter 17. Alarmed, Daniel returned with Emily to Ashwood, compelled by a force deeper than logic, perhaps Sarah's lingering spirit, guiding them toward answers. The town appeared unchanged, quaintly picturesque yet heavy with wary silence. Locals avoided their gaze, eyes darting away nervously, refusing to acknowledge their return. At the ruins of Blackwood Estate, now overgrown with twisted vines and ivy, Emily shivered violently. "He's awake again," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Mom can't hold him anymore." Daniel's heart sank with dread. They explored cautiously, footsteps crunching through rubble until Emily paused, staring at the ground. A fresh carving of symbols identical to those Daniel remembered glowed faintly on shattered stone. A chill settled deep in Daniel's bones as he realized someone, or something, had been recently summoning the shadow entity back to life. Chapter 18. They sought answers in town, but found only hostility or frightened silence until they encountered Father Malcolm, the town's elderly priest, who reluctantly revealed a secret society rooted deeply in Ashwood's history. The Black Circle, descendants of those who first bound the shadow, had been corrupted over generations, now seeking to harness the shadow's power rather than contain it. Their rituals had weakened Sarah's sacrifice, reawakening the shadow entity once again. Father Malcolm warned them urgently. The Black Circle planned their final ritual that night, believing Emily's blood, once touched by darkness, could fully release the shadow entity into their control. Chapter 19. Determined to save his daughter and end the nightmare forever, Daniel and Emily confronted the Black Circle deep within the ruins of the mansion. Cloaked figures encircled an obsidian altar newly rebuilt, chanting as darkness writhed above. Emily's presence triggered a surge of power. The shadows shrieked, hungry for her soul. Daniel fought ferociously, disrupting chants, destroying symbols. But the shadow, gaining strength rapidly, descended into the circle, devouring cultists one by one in a spectacle of betrayal and screams. Emily was lifted by invisible forces, the shadow demanding her final sacrifice, yet again trapped between worlds. Chapter 20. At that moment, Sarah's spectral form appeared, brilliant yet anguished. She'd returned, bearing the marks of endless spiritual battle. Her presence stunned the shadow, allowing Daniel to seize Emily from its grasp. In a final effort, Sarah gestured urgently toward the altar, communicating without words. Daniel understood her desperate plan. He stepped forward, taking Sarah's place in front of the shadow entity, offering himself willingly, accepting death to seal the darkness. But Sarah reached out, shaking her head. Her sacrifice was still binding. She only needed him to join his strength with hers, a unity of souls, light and love powerful enough to seal the shadow permanently. Hand in ethereal hand, they confronted the shadow entity, blending their life forces. A cataclysmic surge of energy filled the ruin, consuming darkness, collapsing stones, and finally obliterating the altar. Chapter 21. Daniel awoke alone beneath morning sunlight filtering through broken stones. Sarah was gone again, perhaps forever, but the oppressive shadow's presence was erased completely. Beside him, Emily stirred, unharmed, yet tearful. Together, father and daughter rose, breathing fresh air free of whispers. The town, released from the shadow's oppression, celebrated cautiously. Yet Daniel felt Sarah's absence profoundly, a deep wound he knew would never fully heal. Chapter 22. Months later, Daniel discovered journals Sarah had left hidden for them, pages filled with love, strength, and guidance for Emily's uncertain future. Reading her words brought Daniel comfort, but also the quiet understanding that their fight had consequences. Sarah warned the shadow could never be fully erased, merely forced into dormancy. Daniel understood vigilance would become their legacy, passed down to Emily and generations after, guardians against darkness. Chapter 23. Emily matured with her mother's strength, mastering the knowledge Sarah left behind, vigilant and determined. She traveled widely, tracking obscure occult practices, alert for echoes of the shadow. Occasionally she felt its distant stirring, a cold whisper on dark nights, a warning that peace was always fragile. Years later, Emily returned to Ashwood, now rebuilt and thriving, seemingly untouched by darkness. But beneath its charm, she felt uneasy familiarity. Visiting the place where Blackwood Estate once stood, she discovered faint symbols freshly etched onto a hidden stone. Her heart sank. The shadow was stirring again. Chapter 24. Emily summoned Daniel, aged but strong in resolve. Together, they faced a grim reality. Shadows never vanish, they wait, patient and cunning. And so, beneath twilight skies, Emily began carving protective symbols, speaking ancient chants, passing rituals down to her own children who watched solemnly, learning a battle that would become their inheritance. But as Emily finished, wind whispered softly through trees, carrying a familiar voice. Gentle yet sorrowful. Sarah's presence lingered, comforting and watchful. Emily smiled sadly, knowing that darkness would always threaten, but also knowing they'd never face it alone. Somewhere, deep in unseen realms, shadows stirred impatiently. The eternal struggle persisted, bound forever in cycles of sacrifice, love, and unyielding defiance. As decades slipped by, Emily's own children, twins named Olivia and Thomas, grew into their grim inheritance. Trained carefully in protective rites, they lived seemingly normal lives, hiding beneath facades of simplicity while always feeling the shadow lurking just beyond perception. The twins shared an innate bond, stronger than mere blood, interwoven with ancient whispers and subtle signs of an encroaching darkness. Olivia, intuitive and compassionate, often dreamed vividly of Sarah, guiding her gently through cryptic landscape. While Thomas, pragmatic and fierce, obsessively studied their family's occult legacy, determined never to lose another soul to the shadow. One storm-swept night, as lightning painted jagged scars across the sky, both twins simultaneously awoke, compelled by an urgent pull toward Ashwood's outskirts. A chill sliced through their veins as they found themselves standing at the ruins of the old mansion, now barely visible beneath thickets and moss. A voice resonated from deep below ground, taunting yet mournful, calling to them by name, familiar yet distorted. Realization dawned coldly upon Olivia and Thomas. The shadow sought them personally, eager to break a lineage that had repeatedly thwarted its return. Chapter 26. Driven by a mixture of dread and determination, the twins unearthed a hidden passage, descending cautiously beneath the ruin into tunnels long forgotten. Beneath layers of roots and earth, an untouched altar waited, obsidian gleaming malevolently under torchlight. But they were not alone. From shadows emerged cloaked figures, remnants of the supposedly vanquished Black Circle, still loyal to the shadow. Thomas and Olivia readied themselves, invoking wards that shimmered defensively around them. Battle erupted violently, their ancient chants clashing with the guttural invocations of cultists. Amid chaos, Olivia heard Sarah's voice urgently guiding her, directing her toward a hidden artifact beneath the altar, an object of power capable of permanently sealing the shadow. Diving beneath blows and curses, Olivia grasped the artifact, feeling immense power surge through her veins. As she lifted it, however, a chilling realization filled her. The artifact demanded a price, a soul willingly given. Chapter 27. As the shadows surged, threatening to overwhelm Thomas, Olivia made a choice, eyes glistening with sorrowful acceptance. Thomas, sensing her intention, shouted desperately, but she was resolute, her spirit already entwined with destiny. Whispering words Sarah had shown her in dreams, Olivia stepped forward into darkness. Energy erupted from her body, engulfing the chamber in radiant brilliance. The shadow recoiled violently, its followers incinerated in divine flame. Thomas watched, helpless, as Olivia became pure luminescence, both sacrifice and salvation, sealing the shadow away once more. Thomas emerged alone into the cold night, clutching the artifact now inert, heavy with his sister's sacrifice. A deep, anguished rage filled his heart. Though victorious, the family legacy had claimed another precious life. Chapter 28. Years passed. Thomas lived isolated, consumed by guilt yet fiercely protective of Olivia's legacy. He chronicled every detail, determined that no descendant would ever face the shadow unprepared. The artifact, now seemingly lifeless, remained hidden, locked away from all. But age crept upon him relentlessly, and Thomas knew the shadows lingered patiently, biding their time, waiting for vulnerability. Finally, as his strength waned, he called forth his own son, Aaron, a thoughtful young man with quiet strength, and passed the artifact into his care, burdening him with truth. Aaron absorbed the knowledge solemnly, recognizing immediately the immense weight of duty and sacrifice he inherited. Chapter 29. With Aaron's guardianship, peace settled quietly, Ashwood evolving slowly, gradually forgetting dark history. Yet Aaron knew better. Every peaceful night concealed lurking whispers, testing protective boundaries. Aaron became renowned as a healer, subtly embedding wards throughout Ashwood, binding generations-old rites into everyday routines. Yet whispers persisted. The shadow, still trapped, pressed hungrily against its prison, waiting patiently, timelessly persistent. One evening, Aaron felt a presence unlike any before, a soft touch on his shoulder, maternal, reassuring. Sarah's gentle spirit appeared, faintly shimmering, finally visible after decades of silence. "It's almost time," she murmured sadly, preparing him for inevitable trials ahead. Chapter 30. Under the glow of a blood-red moon, Ashwood trembled again. Aaron, now grown older himself, rallied his family, sons, daughters, grandchildren, to prepare. The shadow, stronger and more determined, pressed fiercely against weakening wards, yearning desperately for freedom. Aaron faced the rebuilt obsidian altar, now pulsing violently beneath Ashwood, its location revealed through Sarah's spectral guidance. The shadow coalesced, immense and monstrous, roaring its defiance. In his final act of defiance and courage, Aaron brandished Olivia's artifact, now awakened and pulsing with inherited strength. Recalling the words passed down meticulously through generations, Aaron willingly offered his life, invoking the ritual, his sacrifice igniting the artifact's true potential. Brilliant radiance exploded, blinding the darkness, permanently sealing the shadow within unbreakable wards powered by generations of sacrifice. As Aaron's life ebbed gently away, he glimpsed Sarah, Olivia, Daniel, and generations of guardians standing beside him, proud and serene, their love binding him forever in legacy. Ashwood breathed anew, liberated, yet solemnly aware the shadow would always wait. Now, however, a lasting barrier, woven from sacrifice, love, and legacy, ensured peace for centuries to come. Above the quiet earth, Sarah's spirit smiled gently, eternally vigilant, eternally grateful, the long nightmare finally given rest. Yet in shadows deeper still, an echo stirred, patient and unending, whispering softly, ever waiting, never dying, bound by love yet forever hungering, eternally suspended between worlds.